said. I'm going to be brief because we are honored today to have Chief DiFederico, Deputy Chief Walsh. I asked them who's running the store while they're here. They said nobody, but they got a radio. But I'm going to let you guys introduce. I know, Chief, you've been with the force a long time here in Canaan and have come up through the ranks, but background, anything you want to tell us? And
sure.
I know I've heard you speak before. You'd like to do it as a sort of conversation.
Yes.
We're an intimate group, and we look forward to hearing from you. Lots of questions, I'm sure, and getting updated on all the good work that you and your department do for those of us who live here. Thank you.
Thank you. So actually, our assistant Jennifer is running the store as she does day to day. Without her, we couldn't get anything done. So the police department is in good hands. When we're not there, it's probably in better hands. So, but thank you for having us today. It's a great honor to be here and speak with you. And like Rob said, I generally don't prepare much of a speech or anything like that. I like to have more of a conversation because I know a lot of people have a lot of questions of who we are, what we do. You see us day to day, but you don't really know exactly what the police department is made up of and what we do for calls for service and that sort of thing. So to give you a brief idea, the police department is currently at 47 sworn officers, plus about 10 or so civilian staff. With our new budget, we are upping our staff to 50. We're adding 3 more officers, which happens very, very rarely, but we were asked to add school resource officers to the elementary schools last year. So to do that, we needed to add more staff because I just didn't have the staffing to accommodate that. So you'll see in the next year, hopefully the next school year, we're going to add full-time school resource officers to our 3 elementary schools. Currently we have an SRO at the high school, an SRO at the middle school, and we have 1 SRO that's kind of roving between all the elementary schools, which we found to be very, very effective, and the schools very much appreciate that, so that's why we're expanding the program. So with 50 sworn officers, 10 or so civilian staff, we have a pretty good sized department for a small community. We answer close to around 15,000 calls for service a year. Could be anything from car accidents to roaming dogs and anything in between. Something that you probably all saw recently in the news is the conclusion of the trial of the Draconis Jennifer Doulos investigation from 5 years ago. That was something that obviously we followed very, very closely. Deputy Chief Walsh and I were involved in that investigation quite a bit back 5 years ago. And you know, we can answer some questions to that, but that was a very interesting time for us, time for New Canaan. Obviously, that's not something that happened very often in New Canaan and at that magnitude. That get national attention like that quite quickly is something very uncommon for New Canaan, but you know, it was something that was as tragic as it was very rewarding to be part of that investigation and participate in it, and the level of the investigation and the detail that occurred throughout that investigation, especially that first month where it was focused down here, was quite interesting. Quite a bit of man hours, and as you can see, the results were pretty impressive. If you watched any of that trial, you could see that there really wasn't a lot of defense that they could offer from the investigation. It was pretty thorough and pretty cut and dry, but quite a bit of investigation that went on in that. So something that I was proud to be involved with, although very, very tragic. On brighter news though for the police department, and Bill Walberg is our building committee chairman, we're moving forward fast and furious with the new police building. Those of you that travel on South Ave can see that progressing daily, and Turner Construction is working like gangbusters on the old building and tearing it down, and they've dismantled the back portion and they've excavated and gutted the schoolhouse building part of it, and they're moving forward with construction phase. And They're committed to completing construction early 2025, probably a year from now, give or take. So that's
That's
pretty.
not what we're telling people.
No, that's just for a select group, right now. You guys are the inner circle.
We will
now.
be moved in by the end of 2025.
But it's, you know, and they're saying, and completion of construction.
Yes.
And then there'll be a few months of moving back in. And
Yes.
as I was speaking earlier, we're at our temporary location on Locust Avenue, and if you can just imagine moving in general, how difficult it may be, but moving a police department, the full operation of a police department across town or anywhere is a monumental task. Just moving the 911 system took months and months, and vendors upon vendors because everybody's got a hand in that, to actually coordinate that and unplug 911 from South Avenue and plug it back in on Locust is not like just pulling the phone out of one and plugging it into the other, but
You have the police department, you have the town IT, and most importantly, you have the state. Very much.
Our radio operators, and there's a lot of people involved, a lot of hands at work, but we have a great staff. Deputy Chief Walsh, Captain Joe Ferenga, who's not here today, he's up at training, but, and all our support staff, it made it possible. And, you know, it took some months to work out the details and iron out the kinks and figure out the parking on Locust Avenue. Our neighbors weren't used to having that kind of activity. And of course, the first time it rained, the roof leaked into our new evidence room, and we had to get that fixed, and yeah. But it's going well. I think it's going well, and we've kind of settled in there. And I'm imagining a year from now, I'll have to tear everybody out. They won't want to leave Locust Avenue for the new building, so it'll be probably difficult to move us back. But so far, it's been pretty good. I can't complain, and I think we're staying within budget. We're staying in time.
We're on time and under budget.
On time and under budget. Yeah. So that's always good to see too. No big budget pitfalls. But other than that, like I said, I like to keep it a conversation. We are very approachable in the New Canaan Police Department. We like to do a lot of community service. We like to reach out to the community. We run our civilian police academies frequently. Obviously with COVID, those things kind of took a sabbatical for a little while, but we're getting those back involved, and that's about an 8-10 week commitment. They meet once a week for a couple of hours and get into a little bit more detail as to what the police department does, investigations, school resource officers, training division, and all sorts of things. And you get a little bit more in-depth view of what we do and who we are and how we operate. So that's been very beneficial. But we also have our community impact officer, who's an officer that's dedicated to the downtown area. That officer works closely with the business district and also with human services and anything involved with the downtown community. So that's something that we've, new assignment that we've done a few years ago that seems to be working very, very well. We rotate that through annually. It's a 1-year assignment, and you've seen Officer Kelly Coughlin do that, and Maria Cece, and Nicole Bartulli. She's actually on her second go around of being the community impact officer. So we find that's very rewarding and helpful to the businesses that aren't here. They don't live here, so they don't really kind of have that connection. But now that they do, they can reach out to these officers and get kind of immediate response. And something that occurred a couple weeks ago, we had some suspicious people at one of the local businesses, called Officer Bartulli, and she was able to blast that out through text message and email to the department and get more of an immediate response. Whereas in the past, you know, if a business had some kind of suspicious activity, they might be a little hesitant to call the main police number. They didn't want to have, you know, 2 or 3 squad cars come rolling up to the front of their business or something like that. But now that they have that personal relationship, it seems to work out pretty well for us.
How easy or hard was it to hire police officers, and once you do hire them, how much training do they have to go through?
So we've been fortunate. We haven't had a mass exodus of officers. So when we hire, you know, this go around, we're hiring 3 new officers, and that's a lot for us. When we've been hiring, we usually hire 1, 2, maybe 3 officers. And the pool that we get to pick from is pretty good. bigger agencies like Bridgeport or New Haven and things like that, where they're down hundreds of officers, you know, it's very, very much a challenge to go to work in an agency like that. That's a, you know, it's an inner city, difficult to work at. The pay isn't as good. And so, you know, what those agencies are doing, I don't know what they're gonna do. I'm glad I'm not in that situation. Fortunately, here in New Canaan, we have great community working, great benefits, great salary for our officers. So we're finding it not much of a challenge to find those good people. We still have our high standards, we have our high expectations. They go through a significant process. First, they'll apply through an online application called Police App, where they can take a written test and the physical fitness test. That's all done before they even kind of get to us. Then once their application is accepted, we'll put them in front of an interview panel of police officers, you know, from patrolmen to sergeants to lieutenants, all kind of a wide range of staff within the police department. From there, they'll move on forward through the process and they'll get a polygraph, a background investigation, a psychological exam. Once they go through all of those procedures, they'll go through another interview with the police commission. Police commission, myself, the deputy chief, and then we'll decide if we're gonna actually extend a job offer to these people. Once they're then hired, they get sworn in and they go to the police academy for 6 months. So we don't see them for 6 months. That's up in Meriden, and they go through 6 months of training.
Even if they were a police officer in New Haven, let's say?
No, if they're previously certified, even if they were previously certified out of state, they can do a comparative analysis and kind of fill in the blanks. So when we do find those lateral entries, if they're certified somewhere else, it's a little bit easier, a little bit cuts things down a little bit for us. But if they do go to the academy or if they are a lateral transfer, once they're done with their training, then they'll come back to us and they'll do 10 weeks of field training. They'll ride with another officer. Hey, this is where the roads are, this is how we respond to calls, this is how we fill out paperwork, that kind of thing. And kind of the hands-on nitty-gritty of how we do it in New Canaan. Once that's all complete, then they're on their own. So it's a pretty long process, as you can imagine. So, you know, that's why, you know, you'll see us at budget time and going up and asking for, you know, certain things. It's because we have to try to anticipate vacancies when they occur, and it takes so long to get these people on the road. It's not like I can hire somebody and have them fully operational within a couple of weeks or a month, like some other, you know, corporation, or, you know, if you're hiring a certified teacher, you bring them in and they start teaching right away. It's not the case for us. It's a much longer process. So we have to do what we can to try to mitigate that. But so far it's been good. But we're always playing catch up. When I started the hiring process for these 3 new positions, in that process we hired 2 people. We sent them to the academy in January, and I had 2 resignations, younger officers that wanted to move on. One came from California, wanted to go back. Another from another agency out of state, kind of wanted to go back. That's not very common. Usually, once we hire people, we keep them on, you know, for the long term. But it just so happened that we gained 2 and we lost 2. So 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. But we've recently went through a hiring process. We identified 3 new candidates. Fine young men that they're going to go to the academy in April, and we're going to get sworn in at the end of this month. So you should see that posted on our social media and whatnot. But we've been fortunate. We have high standards in New Canaan, but so far so good. We've been able to identify good candidates for us.
Chief, once you become an officer, obviously there's ongoing training that's required on an annual basis, I assume. And maybe you could just tie that into what are we thinking about a training facility in addition to the new police station?
Sure, yeah. And that's where Captain Frank is. He's at it's actually triannual. Every 3 years we need to get recertified in the state of Connecticut, and that's where Captain Frank is, and with some other officers. And we split it up. We don't have everybody go every year, you know, so we kind of even it out. But yeah, there's mandated training, and what we've talked about with the building committee and the desire to have a training facility, because a big portion of our training is use of force, shooting decisions, use of force decisions, firearms training, those sorts of things. And as you can imagine, a firearms facility to shoot firearms is few and far between in this area. Real estate is at a premium, and nobody wants that in the backyard. So we have to go to either Danbury or Wallingford or these places far away from New Canaan, and it's very costly for us because we have to pay our people to go and get this training. So the desire was to build a facility, an indoor facility where we could do all of this kind of training and keep people in-house. In a few weeks, we're going to have something that we can bring in. It's actually a firearms trailer. You can actually shoot live ammunition in it, and it has a screen where they kind of play scenarios. So it's a shooting decision, use of force decision type of.
I did that.
Yeah.
I failed.
Yeah. It's very eye-opening if you're not used to it, but that's something that we bring in every year to train our officers and to do some kind of low light shooting and that sort of thing, kind of those things that we're required to do, but that costs us $5,000 every year to do that. So, you know, a training facility would be great, and it would be not only utilized by us, but also some neighboring agencies would be the goal, is to help our neighbors who will come to our aid during a crisis, help us. So we would definitely want to share that resource with them. So we're actively investigating that and pursuing that, but problem is finding a place to put it. Yes, sir.
Question, I assume you occasionally have calls where there's violence or arguments or trouble in the household. Could you talk about how you train your officers to deal with that, and how you do deal with it, and how it's usually handled? Because it's a hard part of the job.
Yeah. And it's definitely evolved over the years. I've been with the police department for 31 years, and it's definitely evolved in my career. And that's part of the mandatory training that our officers receive, is domestic violence awareness training and that sort of thing. And we have a domestic violence coordinator who follows up with all domestic violence calls. So our officers will go and investigate. And back in the day when I first started, it was kind of show up, arrest both parties, let them go figure it out at family court. You know, it's not a big deal. You know, you sort it out, court, go get divorced or whatever you're going to do. And you know, obviously we found that was problematic, because now somebody's a victim of abuse or a victim of an abusive relationship, he or she calls 911 looking for help, and then they end up getting arrested. So we call that dual arrest, because that was kind of just the easy way out. You know, arrest everybody, let the courts figure it out. And we found that was, you know, through our partnership with domestic violence councils, we found that wasn't very effective and wasn't very fair, and it was actually detrimental, because then people that were, again, in these situations were hesitant to call, and we don't want that. So our dual arrest record rates have dramatically come down. So officers will go and investigate, separate the parties, speak to each party, do an assessment, and find out if there is danger here. Was it just two people not agreeing? Stay in separate rooms for the night, maybe have one party leave. If there was a criminal act, arrest one party, separate them. So every situation is a little bit different, but we've gotten much more professional at responding to these types of calls. And that's greatly through our partnership with domestic violence counselors and civilian people out in the real world that work with domestic violence victims, and we can coordinate better on how to respond to those.
Do the counselors come to the scene as well?
They won't come to the scene. No, we don't have any social workers on staff that come to the scenes or anything like that. I know that's kind of a trend. Some larger agencies are going that way, but they certainly are involved after the fact. And like I said, I have a domestic violence coordinator who will then follow up on all domestic violence calls and reach out to the victim, reach out to the offender, and then put them in touch with counselors and the people that will help them. Yes.
I think it's great that you are able to have officers in all the schools now, but I was wondering, you know, we always think it can't happen here, and every time you turn on the TV and you see another shooting took place or an incident, what sort of preparedness do you all go through with your staff such that you know you're ready as you can be?
Yeah, and again, this goes to training. All of these things that we're talking about today involve training. And we have, last week we had training over at the school when the school was out of session. We had our officers go there and do live action training, you know, and in a situation, try to make up scenarios. And we have equipment that we can convert our standard handguns into essentially paintball guns. They can utilize our own equipment and do force-on-force training and create that high level of stress, but obviously not with live ammunition. So it's the type of training that we do that's overwhelmingly received with positive reviews from our officers, because it creates that situation where you're actually in the school, you're walking down the hallways, you know there's somebody violent down the hallway, and you have to go in and do something and pursue them, and you can do it with a you know, with our own weapon systems, but obviously without live ammunition. So it's valuable training, and we have to train to that, and that's what we do. Our officers receive a high level of training. We could always do more. We could always do it better. And like I said, we had to wait for school to be out of session to go and do it over at SACS. If we have a training facility, this is something that we could do much more frequently.
But you would still probably do it in the building, you wanna know where these hallways go, right?
Of course, yeah.
Police
No,
always-
and that's part of the reason why we have our SROs, because they're very intimate and familiar with the schools. They get the other officers in, they can run them through, okay? Because I mean, I don't know if any of you have been into SACS recently, but it's, we were trying to find our training, we walked around for about 20 minutes.
You know, where those hallways are going.
Yeah, so, you know, I mean, can you imagine an emergency where you're trying to find bad guy and go down to the, you know, east wing, room 156. Where's that? I don't know where that is, you know, so it's all part of training. It all comes back to training. So, you know, you kind of always hear that same refrain from us about training and training and training, and that's so vital to us and so important. It's not just a buzzword. It's something that's very, very important, that we have to train our officers how to respond to all of these types of incidents.
Have you? On that too, if you don't mind.
Yep.
One of the things we also like to think about is prevention. So, you know, identifying problem people or people that are going through crises that may cause a situation like that and an act of violence ahead of time. And that's another good reason to have more school resource officers. That way they're in the schools and they can, you know, pick out problem population and get them the help and services they need. And as well as in the general community, we have coast officers.
Right.
And they are trained in critical incidents to talk about de-escalation and talking to people that need those extra resources that are going through mental health crises. One of the things you'll find is, even when it comes to domestic violence, I think the statistic is, I just learned it from I was helping my daughter study for her health test. But another statistic that we also learned is domestic violence, at least half the time there's alcohol, you know, related. And then another half of the time, there's also a mental health crisis, or, you know, other crises that are happening. So we have officers that are trained. They go through, I think it's a 2-week training course in critical incidents, and they're almost like an elevated level of the training that we all get at our review training on dealing with people and how mental health crisis is. So that's another thing that hopefully we're having an effect that we can't even see. You know, it's like that, having that police presence. When you see the car, you're not going to speed. Well, when the officer's coming to your house, speaking to you and trying to intervene and get you the help you need, you're not going to have an act of violence. You're not going to, we just hope for the best. But so it's prevention as well as being trained and ready to react. So I just wanted to throw that.
Yeah, we were talking briefly before lunch about crime statistics in town, and, you know, and that's one of the things you look at. Okay, domestic violence statistics. Is it better that the numbers are high, or do you want the numbers low? I mean, if they're low, does that mean it's being underreported, or people not calling in things that are happening in their home? Or when the numbers go high, is that a good thing, because now these things have always been happening, but now people feel comfortable to call? So it's, you know, statistics only tell so much. You kind of have to look at what are the numbers actually saying.
Have you ever, I can't remember any time since I've lived in town for 46 years, whether you've had to use your gun.
No,
I just.
We're very fortunate we don't have a lot of needs for use of force. that level, I mean, that's the highest level, that's deadly force. You know, we use varying degrees of force, you know, all the time, whether it's hands-on, verbal force, taser, you know, those sorts of things. So it happens more than you probably know, but at the level of deadly force, no. But when it does happen, it's highly critical, and we've got to get it right.
So, do you aim for people's legs?
No. No. Well, we're no, that,
I'm just thinking, you know,
that-
not everybody has to
Yeah.
die.
yeah, no, and that's a fair question, and that's a fair statement. But that's not realistic. That's Hollywood and that sort of thing. What we're trained to do is train to stop the threat, and you take what's available to you. If that's all that's available to you, you shoot to stop the threat. And that's really what it comes down to. But that's, again, at a very high level of deadly force. This person is gonna either take my life or take someone else's life, so I've got to stop that threat. And there's varying degrees of use of force that go through way before that for a lot of other situations. So that's kind of a short answer of a very complex question. Yes.
Can you walk us through like a 911 call? And where, does it go to you first?
Yep.
Does it go to, and then do you farm that out to the fire department and the EMTs?
Yep.
Or, and how do you work together with them?
Great question. Really, really great question. So New Canaan Police Department is called the PSAP, Public Service Answering Point. Okay, so that's part of the process of moving the police department from South Avenue to where we are now. We field all 911 calls. We are first responders, so if it's a medical call, we will respond to all medical calls. Other towns, it's the fire department, that's the medical first responders, and obviously our volunteer ambulance corps comes along as well. But as far as any medical calls, we'll go on them and be there first on the scene. That's why we carry AEDs, we carry oxygen, we're trained in CPR. Again, more training. These are more things that are
Are
also
you all
covered.
EMTs as well?
We're not EMTs, we're one level below that.
Okay.
So all the cars have Narcan or is
Yeah, yeah. So we can administer Narcan. So a 911 call will come into the police department. 911 displays your name, address, your location. You can also text 911 now. I don't know if you're aware of that. If you're ever in a situation where you can't speak, again, if you're unfortunately in a domestic violence situation, you're hiding in a closet, or someone's broken into your home, you don't feel comfortable to speak, you can text 911. Okay? That will come into the police department. If it's an ambulance call, we'll take the initial information, we'll get our officers responding, and we send that to what's called CMED. I can't remember what CMED is. It's emergency dispatching. It's a medical emergency dispatching center, and that's located up in Fairfield. And what they will do, because the state requirement now is that the call taker has to stay on the line and give the caller emergency guidance, whether it's a choking victim or somebody with a heart attack or something. They have to stay on the line with them and give them emergency medical dispatching instructions. So we farm that out to another agency because our dispatcher is doing a million other things while they're
And then
here.
they call paramedics and
So
EMTs?
then they'll dispatch the NICVAC group, okay?
Okay.
But it'll all come over our radio system, so we know, we share that information. Similar with fire, if a fire call comes in, we'll send that up again to it's a Fairfield Westport Regional Dispatch Center, and then they'll dispatch fire, because fire has a very specific way to dispatch their engines on, what trucks they need and what kind of mutual aid and, all that sort of thing. So that all gets farmed out, but any police calls we go on. We dispatch ourselves.
So if there's a multi-car pileup on 95 and, the fire department is needed to extract people from their cars, you need paramedics, EMTs, police.
Yeah.
Do you do any training together so that you know how not to have total chaos in a
Yeah.
disaster like that?
Yeah, fortunately, we work very well with our fire department. Unfortunately, we don't have to go to 95 for any accidents. But we
Okay,
do-
because that
we
would be
do-
like Norwalk or Stanford.
Yeah. Occasionally, we might assist on something on the Merritt Parkway, but again, that's state police. But
Oh,
again,
okay.
being first responders, will respond because that
Yeah.
could be a potential medical call or a fire call or needing an extrication. But Yeah, we work closely, we, you know, we could always do more training with fire, but we do some training with them and recognize that they have a role to do, we have a role to do, and we all work very well together. And a situation like that, yeah, it's a motor vehicle crash, victims are trapped in the car, so that's a police call, that's a fire call, and that's an ambulance call. So we all kind of have to work together and coordinate with each other, and, you know, we have to provide some scene safety, make sure that nobody's gonna get injured any further. So that's where police come in, we position our cars properly, block off traffic. Fire comes in and extricates and cuts off the roof of the car, and then ambulance people come in and isolate the patient and remove the patient from the vehicle. So it's a very chaotic balance, but it works. It works because, yeah, it's true.
Do you have a policy, when you arrest someone, what's your policy on publicizing the name or even having a picture of the person?
Freedom of information. It's
Pardon?
all public information.
Okay,
I don't decide what Mike Diamond publishes.
okay.
I have to provide it to him, and that's it.
That's it?
It's
just
public
the law.
information.
It's the law, okay.
Yep, I don't have a choice of whose name I can prevent from getting in the paper. If Bill Walbert gets arrested tonight for whatever he does,
Yeah.
hopefully not.
No,
You know, as much as I would love to keep it out of the press, I don't have that option. Yeah.
Hi, Chief, thanks for coming today. Could you just speak briefly, ever so briefly, about, in large investigations, let's say similar to Dulo's case, where you have to involve state and other local agencies, and how does that work? How does the department escalate that to involve other agencies?
Yeah, so another good question, and, you know, we're trained professionals here in Canaan, and, you know, but we quickly can recognize what occurs that's beyond our means, beyond our resources. So we have mutual aid agreements that we could work with, like the Dulos investigation. We quickly realized this is a big deal. This is something that's gonna require a lot of hands. Not that we were incapable of doing our part, but it was just gonna need more manpower. So that's when we called the state police partners of the Western District Major Crime Squad. They came out and they have a team that can come in and process that garage and that house and take evidence and process evidence and package up evidence. So generally it's you know, a situation like that, our first responding officers will go to the scene. They have supervisors. We have supervisors that work every shift, sergeants and lieutenants. And then if it's something that's going to require more of an investigation, they will call out our investigators, who they are all sergeants and lieutenants, and they have specialized training in handling investigations. And then if it's something large scale, our policy is that they will notify our command staff, myself, Deputy Chief Walsh, Captain Freeman, and we'll coordinate amongst ourselves. All right, hey, this is something where we need to call in some additional resources. And you know, in the public services with fire, police, we're very good at recognizing and sharing resources, and you know, you'll even see it when we have a significant accident that occurs and we have to map it out. Well, we don't have the mapping equipment, the total stations, the surveying equipment is, you know, multi-thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. But Darien has that, and they have a team that can come up and help us map a scene. So, you know, through just years of developing relationships and mutual aid agreements, that's kind of how we handle those things. So it's pretty much a call that we kind of make collectively, whether or not we're going to call in some additional resources. Leo.
Chief, you broached the subject when you said you could text into 911, which I honestly didn't know, which is interesting. I was going to ask you, from your professional perspective, this is a question that our town debates back and forth, is how important is cell coverage to public safety? And what can we do to better inform the public on the need of that?
Yeah, I know. Certainly in previous administrations, that was a hot topic, and you know, from our perspective, you know, look, cell service is vital to our everyday life, right? I mean, everybody has a cell phone. Everybody relies on it. And where we find it's important is, you know, if we're going to a scene, obviously we want people to be able to call in 911 if they have a situation where they need help. they need to call, and a high portion of our calls that come into 911 are from wireless callers. Additionally, we want our officers to be able to communicate with each other. We have computers in each of our cars that rely on cell service. And when we're in these large-scale investigations, not everything that we can communicate goes over a two-way radio, because everybody can hear that. So when our investigators are up there handling sensitive information and needing to call additional resources or talk to other officers, we rely on cell service to do that. So it is very important. How we get there, that's for all you to figure out.
And Leo, I think everyone should know that any complaint you have about, yes, exactly, any complaint you have, you should be directed to Rich Townsend. And as a tireless town volunteer, he's happy to take complaints 24/7. Knocking on his door is not something that you should shy away from.
I think on that note, we will ring the bell. Thank you so much.